Welcome back to the Great World Podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Hedges, joined by co-host Jacob Woolman. Jake, what do you have for us today?
Today we'll be starting our debate series on changes that should be made to the schools and going over some additional history about Radio Springs Park. So, let's start off by going to the park.
Alrighty, we'll see you all there. Back here at the Radio Springs Park, covering a little bit of the history about it. So, Radio Springs Park, a bit of that history. This was the beginning, according to the legend. Pahaska, meaning white hair, the famous tribal chief of the Osage Indians. Long before the coming of the white man, he was told about the brown water that flowed from the rock in the cliff. His people discovered the spring in their search for the fountain of youth, drank deeply of its cool waters, and were made well. The fame of the magic water spread far and wide, and was passed down from generation to generation among these proud people. The white men who followed them also came to have faith and believed in the curative powers of the iron water. These were the pioneers who rebuilt Nevada from the ashes of the Civil War. Theirs are the names inscribed in the pages of the history of our city. This, in part, is their story, and the wonderful things they accomplished with 182 acres, rolling hills, ragged bluffs, great boulders, and deep ravines that were to bring thousands of visitors to their community. When the first steam locomotive sped through Nevada on its way to Indian Territory 97 years ago, it passed Hartley's brick factory in the southwest part of town. A nearby pond, fed by many springs in the area, provided necessary water for making the bricks. It was cold and clear and destined to become part of the famous artesian lake at Radio Springs Park. Nevada was making great strides in 1883, and Joseph E. Harding, cashier of the Thornton Bank and father of Mrs. Amy Logan, was one of the town's leading citizens. Harding and a group of local businessmen recognized the need for a recreational area, purchased all of the land that now comprises the Nevada Country Club, VIL Hill, Radio Springs Park, and the West Hill adjoining it, which is owned by the members of the Carter family. Harding and Associates immediately began improvements. Knowing of the existence of many springs in the area, men foresaw little difficulty in having a well drilled for drinking water purposes in the park. On a bright Sunday afternoon, with half the kids in town, including Mary Robinson and her brother J. Ben, gathered to watch. Everything was proceeding according to schedule when it happened. Suddenly, with a rumble that shook the hillside, water erupted 10 feet into the air, and the pure white sulfur water poured from the great artesian well in less than a year. A large lake had formed at the bottom of the hill, where it soon joined the small pond at the other end of the ravine. And that is a little bit of the history of Radio Springs Lake here in Nevada.
Yes, and so that was to give you a little bit additional information from what was provided in the last episode. And so now we're just going to kind of walk around the lake and just kind of give you an idea of what it looks like today. And because it happens to be the Christmas season, it's all lit up. And that's why we're joining you here at night. So we can now transition over to taking a look here. So this is where we're at. Bit of an island that can be found off of this gazebo that's on the current lake. And so you'll notice here we have a place where any of the locals around here or anybody visiting through here, they can take a little bit of a drive around and they can see the lights here at the lake. So it's a display that the city puts on here at Radio Springs Park from Thanksgiving all the way to New Year's, and it is very festive and always good to see the lights that they put up each year here at Radio Springs Park.
Right. And the locals here will know that the gazebo here is not the original. There was much more of a gazebo once, where there was a restaurant bar where dances were held, which was quite the attraction for the community and for travelers. So, again, quite a history in this area.
So you'll notice a car right there going by. So, yep, that's what people around here do during this time of the year for the lights. They go around the lake, drive around, and look at the beautiful display.
That's right. annual Christmas light display here in Nevada. Lights at the lake at Radio Springs Lake.
Now we are going to send it back into our studio. So we'll see you there.
We'll see you there. And after a bit of a walk in the park there at Radio Springs, showing you the lights at the lake and a bit of that history, we are back in the studio. What else do you have for us tonight, Jake?
Well, now that we've looked at some more of the park history and gone to the actual park, let's go ahead and talk about some nationwide changes that I think should be made to the school district.
Okay.
So this is kind of getting us into our debate series about schools and changes that should be made. Next week, we're also going to have another series about oaths and about different debates that there are about should oaths be taken. But at least for today, we'll go ahead and start off our series on changes that should be made to different schools. So I guess today we'll look at some of the scheduling changes that I think should be made. I think this is one of our biggest things that is wrong with public schools across America. And it's the fact that we go off of different schedules. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that every school district is different in the way that they plan things. And so I think it could be interesting to have a universal schedule, at least for the United States.
Okay.
And so I think one of the things that should be done is block scheduling. What is your opinion about that?
Block scheduling.
Based on from our experience that we have.
Well, I would say that isn't a great background to work from because we haven't had much experience with it.
Yeah, just had a couple of weeks on and off, so not too much, but from what we do have, the experience of...
It was alright, perhaps could have been better executed, but given all that, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but that's not to say that it couldn't be better executed, and I'm sure if that was something that you did regularly, that it would begin to be better executed.
Yeah, and the last time that it was done within the school district was the year of 2005 to 2006. The current school district that we go to has been on a regular schedule since 2006, 18 years ago. And so, it's certainly not any, it's not a foreign concept to Nevada at our school district.
But it has been a little while.
Yes, it certainly has been. And
so there would be a bit of adjusting, and certainly you said you'd like to see this implemented on a federal level.
Yes.
That would be quite the adjustment.
Yes, a lot of these changes I think should be made because I want to take, for example, if you move to a different school district at some point. If you're a student and you move school districts, I know somebody who's gone to 10 different school districts over their time. And so it can be a lot, changing from, maybe going from block scheduling to regular scheduling to block scheduling and back and forth, depending on what school district. And so that's one of the many challenges that students who switch school districts in the middle of their time as a student. So I think it would be useful if we just stayed on the same schedule. So another benefit to that is if we all had, there's some school districts where we only go to school on Mondays, and some like every other Monday, or some, do every single day like normally, the 5-day school week.
Right.
And I think it would also be useful if we did the same thing as far as that goes. And here's why that would be useful. If you go to certain schools, they're not able to do certain sporting events, or it makes it more inconvenient, let's say. Most of the time it doesn't completely eliminate sporting events, but it does make it a bit of an inconvenience when schools do not have school on certain days. And so I think that could be something that could be adjusted. So that's something that having a national school schedule that's used across all school districts could have.
Right. Well, I see how one could see is where that could be beneficial. Now, to push back on that bit, some might say that, you want to standardize the school week, every school across the nation do block scheduling. Now, we've already seen a fair bit of standardization in public education, and,
sits, look at where standardization has gotten us. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that's why you have to be very specific, and that's the one thing about creating a national school schedule is that it could be modified to fit whatever needs are necessary, and so I think that could be a very positive aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, and that is one of the common issues, of course, with standardization, is you have a standard across the nation. It oftentimes isn't suited as well to localized nuances, because, of course, as you see within standardized tests, they are standardized so much so that to do well on standardized tests, what you have to do is have a well-developed test-taking strategy, and it isn't actually a deeply educational or even a deeply effective approach. So that, I guess, would be another end of the argument, would be, we've already standardized enough. If anything, we should be localizing things and kind of working to fine-tune things in a way that's most directly going to benefit the students.
Yeah, and I think there is a way to create a national school schedule to where it's not everything's being standardized. And what you just mentioned was tests. And I think on that level, yes, it should come down to that should be more localized.
And even at large, I don't know about you, but I'd certainly say that a standardized curriculum.
Yeah, I think even the curriculum is sometimes a little bit too standardized, and because it's set on too wide scale of a level.
Right.
And so I think those are certain examples of where it might not necessarily be more useful for that purpose, but I still think there are many purposes, and I think that they, as far as when it comes to scheduling, that the purpose would be more suited.
Right, and oftentimes you'll see with the standardized curriculum, you'll have, one standard level for the student body, and there's one student that's able to perform at a high level, and, well, the curriculum simply does not allow them to do that, and then you have, of course, on the other end, and a number of other nuances that are simply missed altogether by this approach. But that again is pandering off a bit into another related argument, something that we will touch on later in this debate series.
Yes.
Anything else you have, though, on the topic of school schedules and what you had said?
So I think block scheduling is one thing that would be a lot better to have. But another thing that might be useful is if all schools across America had longer lunches. What do you think about that?
Well, that would be nice, and I would be in favor of that. I think lunch times are fairly limited. The only thing is, of course, you want to ensure that that's not cutting in on actual studies.
Yes. Yeah, and so I think you just extend the school day an extra 10 or 15 minutes.
Sure, and I would be
add it on.
good with that. Of course, it's possible for that to go overkill, but I'd say nowhere near that, and probably ought to test that a bit more as far as knowing what's overkill. I'd say things are fairly minimal in general when it comes to education at this point. What would you say?
Well, and I think we should kind of go away from the thought process that lunch is just about eating, a quick little snack. Or, maybe a little bit of a meal for certain people. For me, it's more of a snack than it is for a meal. I just, I don't eat a whole lot during lunch.
Right, there's more to it than that. It gives you time to sort of recoup a bit and have a clear mind going back into your academics. So quality lunch period is an important thing.
And is also lacked, especially among elementary teachers, due to the fact that they don't really have a lot of time, and the amount of time they take them to the cafeteria to when they come back and get them from the cafeteria.
Of course, talking about schools and being in a school ourselves, our main focus has been students, but that definitely is something worth mentioning is teachers. What do their lunch periods look like? Are they fairly limited? It sounds like you said they don't have much time to have their lunch.
Yeah, not much time at all, and sometimes students will come back to class a little bit earlier, and so then they lose out on that time. And I think not only for the fact that teachers have even shorter lunches than students have, not only do I think people don't have enough time to eat, But I also think that doing this serves as a really good mental break as far as like between certain subjects.
Mhm.
So,
Right, as I talked about, sort of a bit of time to recoup and have a more clear mind going into the
Yes.
next subject from an academic standpoint.
I think when we go throughout our daily lives, and really I think this can be said for really all Americans that live here in the United States, that, you know, everybody in the U.S. Just at their workplace doesn't have a proper amount of time to take a break in the middle of the day. I mean, you look at other countries that take hours, sometimes even 2 to 3 hours for a lunch break. I mean, I don't think we should have a 3-hour lunch break, but I guess it's possible to implement that, but then of course you'll have to take that time out of other
Right.
parts of your day.
So maybe not that much, but a bit more.
Yes.
A bit more would be nice. And you know that I'm a French student. That's something I enjoy. And of course, the French culture. That's something they have a much longer lunch break.
Yes.
Maybe we don't need one that long. I don't know exactly how long the standard lunch break is in France, but I know on average it's longer than one in the States.
Yes, so currently right now, I believe that our lunch time is about 22 minutes. Does that sound about right? About 22 minutes?
That does sound about right.
And I think it's even less in the younger grades.
Right.
Like middle school and elementary, I think, or even a little bit less than that. So 22 minutes. What do we think it should be? Maybe about double that, like 45? Make it a whole class period that's just dedicated to lunch?
I think that's fair.
And so I guess the benefit to that, if we're looking at it from a standpoint of more time, is that not only you have a chance to eat more, but you're able to kind of relax your mind. You know, maybe you have a test in the afternoon and you want to study for it. Although I don't know how relaxing studying for a test is, but it still gives you the opportunity to do
A great
more.
opportunity to do so.
So I think just having that extra time could be very useful, and I think it would be much appreciated by many students and teachers across the country.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that this affects certain students. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've certainly seen it in our school cafeteria, students who don't really have time to finish their lunch. I mean, I know that I've been there. I mean, it is fairly limited. I'll admit that I'm a slow eater to begin with, but what about you? Do you feel like you have much time to eat?
No, not at all. And I just realized it's not 22 minutes, it's 21 minutes.
21
is
minutes.
Actually what it is.
Yes, so less yet than we initially thought.
Oh, wait, no, I think. No, it's 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes. It's not 21 or 22.
Minutes.
It's 20 minutes. It will not keep changing. I know for sure now that I thought about it that it really is. Because it goes from 11:26 to 11:46.
Are you sure about that?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I can visualize our school schedule.
Okay.
It's 11:26
so that's
to
a 20-minute
11:46.
lunch shift,
Yeah.
which is fairly limited. And
Yeah.
with that, you see students in the cafeteria who aren't finishing their lunch, myself included. Jake, you said you've experienced that a bit too, and that's an issue, of course. In the classroom learning, it's a bit more difficult to do when you're not well nourished. You barely had your lunch.
Yeah.
So.
And maybe even an hour. I said 45 minutes, but even an hour could be really useful. I know that we've both been through band camp at within our band at our school, and the lunch period does last an hour.
Right.
And I think that's been very useful, or at
Absolutely.
least 45 minutes. If you cut even a little bit of that time out, an hour, it feels like a long time, but I think it's been very useful during band camp.
And some people might look at that as, well, you're wasting a lot of time, you're taking out a whole hour for lunch. But at that point, we've done a lot physically, musically. The brain might even be a bit exhausted. It's very hot that time of year. And so it's necessary to recoup a bit and again, come back in with a clear mind. And taking that hour out allows us to better use the hours that we are actively practicing, setting drill, and all the rest to be fully mentally, physically present, and all the rest. So it really helps efficiency, if you ask me. What would you say?
Yes, and if we go back to just a normal school day, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but let's look at it this way. Morning or afternoon, when do you see more people falling asleep in the middle of class?
Well, afternoon, of course, because it's later in the day.
And so I think because we haven't had that break in the middle during lunchtime, people are not as well ready for the afternoon classes.
Right.
And for somebody whose three hardest classes are after lunch,
Yes.
in the afternoon, I do understand how you might not be as ready to go as you are in the morning as in the afternoon.
Right. And I think that definitely plays a role in it. You know, I've been there, had a good night's sleep as usual. Maybe it could be not having as much of a lunch, but there towards the end of the day and coming dangerously close to about dozing off. I don't know about you.
Yes, and I think something else that could be done is if there was a separate room, and I'm not exactly sure how this would be done, maybe a gymnasium or um, a performing arts center. You know, we have one that's attached to our school.
Right.
Some place like that, a very large room that could fit a bunch of people, could be used as a homework room if people don't want to sit in the lunchroom for 45 minutes, or even an outside seating area. I know that a lot of schools already have an outside seating area. We do as well. We've gone out there many times this year. And so that could also be useful to be used as like a homework spot or a study spot. Or the library even. That's another good place that could be used.
Absolutely.
So
Definitely, I think that would be worthwhile. Now, another thing worth looking at is I'm not really sure what's the most common, but at our school, as you know, there's a closed lunch shift policy. How do you feel about that? I know certain other schools, and even I believe in the past in our own school district, they maybe seniors were allowed to check out, maybe take off for lunch and come back for their later classes. Do you feel like they ought to be able to do something like that?
yes, and I think that would also be easier if there was block scheduling to be
Right.
done. So that could be an argument for doing
I
block
see.
scheduling. Now I understand that the longer lunches, that's probably what people are going to generally agree with me more about than some of the other stuff like block scheduling and well, some of the other things that we're going to bring up here in a minute. But I think an open lunch policy could be good. I think there could be benefits to that. The other thing is, at least some, juniors and seniors, I think it would be open to juniors too, but I think that could maybe tempt certain juniors or seniors to skip during the afternoon. I think that could be more of a negative side effect of that, but it could be done.
Well, not to open another can of worms, but relating to that, cafeteria food. I don't know about you, but I'd take the can of worms.
Yes, yeah. On some occasions, that might be the better option. Yeah, I see what you're saying there.
Absolutely. So, where do you think it all went wrong? Cafeteria food.
I don't know a whole lot about the history of when it possibly went wrong. Where do you think it did?
Frozen cardboard monstrosities. I'm not sure, but we've got to get to the bottom of it.
All right, so that might be another really important thing that we should change within our school. So another thing, in addition to block scheduling, which is probably not super popular. I mean, there's a few people that I've talked to that are in favor of it, but longer lunches, I think almost anybody would agree about that one. But what about year-round schooling? This has caused the most controversy among the four topics that we're going over today. What do you think about year-round schooling? It would be 6 weeks on, 6 weeks of school and 2 weeks of no school.
You know, I've actually considered this a fair bit, and so long as he gets major holidays off, I think that would be an excellent idea.
Yeah, and I guess you would have to find some way to do that. At some point in the year, maybe it would become 8 weeks to 3 weeks or something like that. But if you could go even off of the ratio of 3 weeks to 1 week, I think even that would be good. So, because we just had Thanksgiving break not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, and what was your opinion about after you came back from that?
Thanksgiving break?
Yeah, feel more rested?
I'd say so. But I would also say that people have some difficulty kind of easing back into it, after having a week or so of doing nothing. So it has its benefits, but certainly has its setbacks as well.
Yeah, there can definitely be some setbacks to that, but do you think that you'll be more ready for the remaining 3 weeks of the semester after having that week off?
I suppose so. What about you?
I think so. I mean, I think that's one of the best examples that we can give is we had a week off and now we have 3 weeks on. So
Right.
I think some people, if they got their mindset to, this was really nice to have Thanksgiving, a week off for that, and then we'll go back for 3 weeks, feel more rested, and then we'll get another week or so off. I think if people look at it like that, they might not see year-round schooling as a bad thing.
Right. And it may or may not be highly beneficial, but I won't complain about extra time off.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if things didn't line up entirely, like let's say that the days were a little bit off by doing that, then just add a few more minutes to the school day. A few more minutes is not going to hurt anybody, especially if you
No.
have a couple weeks off, 1 week or 2 weeks off, depending on how you do it.
Right.
You can either do 3 to 1 or 6 to 2, maybe even
Right.
9 to 3.
Right. Just add it. You say a few more minutes onto the day to compensate for that, which I don't feel like would be a terrible lot to ask.
Yeah, and so let's look at it this way. 20 minutes is currently what we have, right?
Right.
Within lunch. If we increase that to 45, and then we increase it an additional 15, not the lunch, but the school day, that's only adding 40 more minutes of school to have 25 more minutes of lunch, and to be able to do year-round schooling.
Right.
Now that doesn't sound like a bad agreement, right?
Right.
And so I know that there is some, concerns about what year-round schooling would look like, specifically for, summer camps, as we mentioned, and, certain holidays that might not quite line up with block scheduling.
Sure.
But if it could be managed, like if we could work it around and move some things around, it could have some really great benefits to it. And I think it's something that should be considered if we're making all of these other schedule changes.
I think it could. I think it could be beneficial. Any other changes that you'd like to see happen?
Yeah, so that was 3 big changes that I would like to see when it comes to the scheduling. But the last change is the removal of online learning. Now, to be clear, this would be through public schools, not through private or homeschooling.
Right.
Okay, so just to be clear on that. I'm not talking about, removing homeschooling from doing that online. Or virtual learners, virtual students. That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is when you have missed school, you are required to make that up while at home on your computer.
Right.
So I think that part should be removed. That part specifically and only.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about when you've been sick. And you'd say, in place of that, just come back and make it up?
Yes.
Okay.
That's really the only part that I would remove. So, online learning within the school district can still have its benefits, but it can be very stressful if you've missed, let's say, a week of school,
Right.
and you're expected to already have that caught up. Like, let's say that you had the flu and you were out for a week.
Right.
Currently, the expectation is that you will have all of your work completed online by the time you return the following week. And I feel like that's a really high ask.
Right, which when you're down and out with the flu, can be a bit difficult.
Yes, and I know that some school districts during snow days, they have also done similar things. And I don't necessarily know how good that is for students to do as well, to be removing your classic school days that we had, or snow days that we had before, let's say, COVID, when that took into effect.
So, I know it's not quite a standard, but it's definitely a very common platform. As far as online learning goes across the country, I've certainly heard of a lot of other schools that use Google Classrooms, and that our school uses that, and the time it sort of became standard in our school district, it was during COVID, sort of coming back. We were issued Chromebooks, these laptop computers, very low-end ones that freeze up often, have black screens. Yes, they're excellent. I know you're dying to have one. But that's something that we've continued to use even after the end of the COVID epidemic. We've still had the Chromebooks, and if you ask me, our education has taken a real hit. If that were even possible, not that it were excellent to be it was excellent to begin with.
Yeah, I think one of the
And-
major problems with that kind
And
of what
something
you
I feel like at this point it's sort of an excuse. You could say a requirement. I mean, that is standard for teachers in our schools to have a Google Classroom. I don't know that that's a great thing. I think it's something, that they pushed it through, and maybe not the only thing that they kind of pushed through during COVID to say, oh, this is because of COVID. They kind of shoved it down our throats, and what do you know? COVID's gone, and now we still have to do it.
Yeah, and even online testing can be quite annoying at times.
Right.
Especially when you're, let's say, there's certain times where I can remember where people have had to, type an entire essay out while on a Google form so it doesn't save, and they get to the last sentence, and then suddenly their computer just dies, freezes up, loses signal, and exits out, and then they have to retype the whole thing after almost completing the entire essay. So that's one of the things that I feel like could be changed.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing is even the online learning that we do while at the schools, but specifically the learning that is required to do at home within public schools in those certain circumstances that we mentioned.
Right. One thing about Chromebooks is they do freeze up bi-weekly or more often. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're a consumer in the personal computer market.
Yes. So I think we can definitely all agree, us here and everybody watching at home, that there's certainly a lot of faults within the school system, but specifically to our schedules. And I think it could be beneficial to make some changes and for that to happen on a nationwide level.
Mm-hmm. Right. And a correction, I think that's actually a requirement that Chromebooks freeze up at least bi-weekly.
Yeah, it seems like it when you use them. All right, well, that concludes part one of our debate series about changing our schools. That's going to be it for today. In your next episode, we will start our debate series on oaths.
And again, thank you for tuning in to this Radio Springs, checking things out at the lake. As you saw, they currently are doing lights at the lake, which brings us into the Christmas season. We'd like to wish you, for the first time, Merry Christmas from all of us at the Great World Podcast, and stay tuned for additional Christmas specials, things of that nature. But I do believe that's all we have for now. So until next time,
I'm Jacob Fulmer.
and I'm Isaac Hedges, host of the Great World Podcast, signing off. Until next time, from all of us at the Great World Podcast and GWP International, good night and God bless.